Hello everybody, I'm Camsies97 and today I shall bring you a tutorial on how I actually achieve my art style. Now, with one thing or another, unfortunately I have not been well, so I have not been able to, my voice just hasn't been good enough to do this. And also then my microphone packed up, so I had to go out and get a new one. But anyway, this is how I achieve my art style. Now the video here is sped up by about 5,000 times to what actually was being done here. You can see me making little circles to achieve what position I want the character to be in, and how thick I want them to be, how thick set and so on. And then I'll start drawing lines from them with where I want the paws to be, because if you have ferrules you want paws as well. The extra little thing there was the tail, and I'll start drawing little circles or on the lines I've just drawn in order to get a good idea of thickness on the paws. I'll then start the sketch. I'll decipher where I want the sketch to be, and basically just start doing that in a different colour and turn the opacity down. I do achieve this a couple of times to try and get the perspective right, but eventually I do achieve it. So basically you can just see me doing the sketch here. Trying my best to do the eyes, because so the skeleton is probably one of the most important parts that you can do on a drawing, for it does actually give you a good idea of where you want the character to be. You can do it for features as well, and if your character has ears, which my Gamion here does not, well, not visible ones anyway, then I'd suggest drawing lines for those as well. I then start drawing the paws and the main body using the circles I drew earlier for reference. Basically curling around, trying to keep that feral shape. With the sort of legs that go out, in, and then out again. It's quite hard to explain. So I connect them up with the back that I drew, and then I start work on the tail. Basically, this is just the basic sketch first. I think I'm about, I don't know, perhaps an hour in at this point. I did actually forget to draw the tassels for Gamion here. So I just add the 2 lines in and basically draw circles on that as well. I'm not sure how long I was off for this. Okay, I'm back now. There you go. You can tell this is definitely a narration over the pre-existing recording. Anyway, yeah, just drawing the tassels here, and basically, yeah, there you go. The other one, there you go. You'll notice that I actually rub out all lines inside the 2 marks I've just drawn. This is just for perspective reasons. So basically, if you rub out something that's within, basically, if you rub out, say, a tassel that's in front of a paw, in this case, you'll see me rubbing out the paw rather than parts of the tassel, because I want it to look like the paw is in front of the. I want the tassels to make it look like it's in front of the paw. So basically, it's all about perspective, really. I readjust the thickness of the paw there, to make it look more realistic and doesn't look so puffy. I could have added some extra details here, but it's fine, I think. Yeah, there you go. And you can sort of see now with the sketch the final image taking shape. So basically, yeah, that's basically the skeleton done now. Just adding details. What I've done there now is turn what's called the opacity of the layer down, which basically is the see-throughness of the layer. I basically turn it down to get a good idea of where the final sketch is going to be. And you can see the black lines are a lot cleaner and a lot more accurate to what the sketch was. That's mainly because I've turned the correction up all the way up to 19, because I've got a very unsteady hand. So I turn the correction up there and try and get some good clean lines in. With my style beforehand, I've changed my style a little bit now, but beforehand I never actually used the line art. This is purely just for marking purposes, so I wasn't too fussed about how it looked. So, but you can see that the final line art is starting to appear quite solidly over the sketch. This is basically how I do every single drawing. Well, how I used to do every single drawing. And you can see the cursor spazzing around a little bit because I've got so many things wrong there. I had to go and redo it a bunch of times. It doesn't actually take long. Okay, so basically just redoing the paw now, doing that up. Basically just finishing off any details on the line art. The tassel, there we go. It's quite close now. Okay, doing that up. There we go. And here we are. Okay, so that's now the final sketch done. Now you'll notice once again that I turn the opacity down on the line art I've just drawn, once I've corrected various aspects about it. You'll see now the black has just turned into a sort of grey colour. Here I try and keep as close to the lines as possible, and with the black I basically with very dark colours like very dark grey, black and so on, I basically turn the opacity down for black layers so I can see what I'm doing in regards to colouring it. Colouring it in, you know, in regard, yeah. So basically you can see I'm trying to go to the line as close as I possibly can, but not actually overshooting it. This is I did say I didn't have a very steady hand. However, I do have a lot of patience in this regard, so I just keep plugging at it until it looks alright, and you know, correct it for any things I haven't. You'll notice though that I actually draw the lines on the outside first, and then start colouring it on the inside. It just basically gives a crisper line and basically gives a better idea of where you're drawing. Well, not so much that, but it just basically makes an outline for neater lines, basically. With the line art though, you don't actually have to stick to it exactly. If you feel that something could be a little wider, or you know, something needs a bit of adjustment, you can do that with the colours. You don't actually have to readjust the line art in order to do it. Once you've had a bit of practice with this method, it does become a lot easier. Okay, just doing up the tail now. Nothing to worry about there. And the black parts are still grey, simply because the opacity is turned down. The black is see-through. Once I turn the opacity back up, the black will obviously return back to its original colour. It's just simply so I can see what I'm doing with these very dark colours. Okay, there we go. Just finish the rest of that off, will you? Okay, just colouring in the rest of this now. It's good fun, isn't it? There you go again. Look, colouring in the outline before I actually start colouring in the whole foot there, and then I start colouring the foot in. It just gives a crisper outline. So yeah, it's that. You can tell I don't do these YouTube videos often, can't you? I'm rubbish at these. That's the thing about my style though, it is fairly simple once you know how. The techniques used are actually fairly barbaric. But it's good enough to get you started, I think. Though this method does take a lot of time, I'll say this much. I mean, I think this one drawing alone must have taken me about, I wouldn't like to say, about, I'm trying to remember back now, I think about 8 or 9 hours for this one drawing. And there isn't really a sophisticated background on there, it's just a gradient. So yeah, this older method, it does provide results, pleading that you do it right. But it also takes a lot of time. Basically, just forgot a chest marking there. Basically, just implementing that there. Because Gameon is actually quite a tricky little dude to draw. Simply because there's so much. Well, it's not. I wouldn't say there's so much detail on him, but there's quite a bit more than what you may be used to. Anyway, you'll see here that the black lines, they mimic what the line art does. It's not easy to see, but the black lines are actually in the shape of the line art that you've just sketched. Now with colours like bright green here, you don't need to turn the opacity down because it's a bright colour. It's not really necessary to turn it down. Not really necessary to turn the opacity down like you do with black. So because you can see what you're doing already, especially if it's against a dark colour like black. If it's against a similar colour, then you may want to turn the opacity down, but I don't think it will really provide any clarification. You'll notice here that I'm actually giving Gameon here some spikes from his little fluffs. That is just basically emphasis on basically just the fur, basically connecting that little tuft. There you go. You see, basically just putting little spikes on his fur there, just to give emphasis to the actual thing. Okay, so okay, there we go. Just making the lines meet. Once again, only colouring the line art and then going inside and colouring that bit in. There we go. Once again, colouring the outline and then colouring the middle bit. Colouring the outline and then colouring in the middle bit. Sorry if I'm repeating that, but I find that it's actually quite important for this method because it does require a lot of precision, I think. Though it's fairly easy to achieve, it does need quite a bit of attention and care in order to achieve it. But it's the style I'm fairly happy. I was fairly happy with using at the time. My line art wasn't that good anyway. I've learnt techniques now to improve my line art by a significant amount. But at the time, this was really the only way I knew how to draw. So there we go. Slowly, nice and carefully, doing in the outlines first, and then doing the middle bit in afterwards. This method can also be achieved with traditional drawings, as well as digital. Though with traditional, the only part that can really be used is up to the basic sketch stage and the final line art. So unfortunately, layers aren't really used on traditional, as we may know. So unfortunately, that part on can't really be used. So there's that. However, this technique can also be achieved with a mouse. Here, I'm using a graphics tablet because it does make things a lot easier if you're into digital art and creating drawings. Having a graphics tablet makes things so much easier. If you're looking into getting into the serious side of graphical art and design, a graphics tablet will be your best friend. It can be picked up for about 70 quid. I'm not sure what that is in dollars, but I picked my Wacom 1 up for about 70 quid, and best 70 quid I ever spent. Yeah, but this technique can also be achieved with a mouse, and with a mouse the technique will be significantly, well, with a mouse the line art will be a lot better, let's just say that. Now you'll see me actually, I've just applied a bright pink background. This is to see, this is just to visualize any holes in the colour. So basically any gaps that need attention, or if there's any scruffy looking line art like that tail there, we're looking a bit scruffy. Clean up the mouth a little bit, there you go. So yeah, basically just apply a bright pink background so I can see if there's any holes in the line art, and also to make it easier to see when I apply the white colour, because Gamion isn't actually bright pink, as we know. He is actually just white. Well, we may not know that, but he is basically a white creature. So there we go. Start applying the white now. So face first. Basically just carefully going around the lines, putting the white underneath the the other colours. So because white is the base colour for Gamion here, it is important that you put the colour that basically the colour that dominates the character the most is the one that goes on the bottom. Black is not quite as prominent on old Gamion here, so that comes next, and green is the final layer, as he has green highlights. But white is the dominant colour. Whatever colour is most prominent on the creature, it is generally the one that goes on the bottom on this technique. Other techniques, of course, you may find it different, but I find it easier to make the most dominant colour on the bottom layer. It just basically cleans everything up and makes things a lot easier for you. Okay, so colouring all that in, making sure there's no holes. Oh dear, you can still hear my cold thundering away there. So yes. So yeah, the most dominant colour on the character goes on the bottom layer. And the line art, believe it or not, actually goes on the top. Just to give you the best idea of what's happened. Now, for a moment there, the applying the white doesn't appear to have done anything until obviously we applied the gradient. That garish pink really didn't suit at all. Okay, I had to cut a bit out there, but I basically tilted the image to get a better idea of what I was doing with the shading. Now, you may be thinking, what am I doing here? What I'm doing is actually applying another layer and applying solid black, right? Literally solid black with an airbrush. Basically it turns the opacity. Basically, this may look hideous when you first start, but the results do eventually show. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So with this line art, just cover everything that doesn't glow. So yeah, with this shading technique, cover everything that doesn't glow. This may be a little hard to grasp at first, and it may not look good, but at the moment, but you can sort of see how the shading's going to work. It does look very extreme at the moment until you turn the opacity down. You can sort of see now, basically correcting any errors and holes. So you can sort of see how, now that I've basically made it a bit transparent, like so, you can sort of see that it takes on the same effect as what the manga, basically what coloured shading does. But you don't need to change colours at all. You just have black and basically just shade with that. Again, this is an old technique, it's good enough to get you started. I call this the sooty shading technique, because it does look, when you're shading it, it does look sooty, like it's been half covered in soot from a fireplace or something. So basically, yeah, just shading up there, turn the opacity down again, start all over again on another layer. And I basically start doing the same thing now, but with the lighting. So basically with white rather than black. So just applying white everywhere where the shading would apply. Well, where the lighting would apply, rather. Now you could use a smaller airbrush here. My one was a bit tad on the large side for my liking, but it's really no problem at all. It got the job done. Now, because white is so much brighter than black, it's obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum, you may only need 1 or 2 layers and have the opacity down. You may not, well, what I'm trying to say is you don't actually need as many layers as lighting as you do with black, because black is quite subtle and, you know, and so on, whereas lighting, it can be quite prominent. It can be quite, you know, in your face. So you won't need with this technique, you won't need as many layers of lighting here. So basically just going through it, seeing how it looks, turn the opacity down. Oh dear, sorry. And basically it's, yeah, so there you go. Okay, and that's the final picture with signatures and what have you. This is actually used for my intermission stream posters, so basically when I'm not there, this will appear on the screen. I do hope you found this tutorial somewhat helpful. In the meantime, have a nice day, and thank you for watching. Enjoy your art.